6 on breakfast. Who would have thought we would see the day? Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un acting as best mates. North Korea agreeing in principle to ditch its nuclear weapons. For analysis of the historic summit in Singapore, we're joined this morning by Otago University international relations expert Robert Patman. Tēnā koe, Robert. Thanks for being with us this morning. What did you make of the summit?
Well, it's certainly, I suppose, in one step, it's a step forward. Almost inconceivable given the rhetoric between the two leaders a few months back. But actually, at the end of the day, although Mr. Trump keeps hailing it as a breakthrough and the relationship between the two leaders he characterised as excellent, the actual, when you look at the small print of the document, it's quite disappointing. In fact, it seems on the face of it that America's made the more substantive concession, which was to suspend military exercises with South Korea. In return, the North Korean dictatorship had pledged in an open-ended fashion to denuclearise. But the demand before the summit from the Americans was they wanted verifiable and irreversible signs of dismantling nuclear weapons in North Korea. And there's nothing in the document that backs that up. Yeah,
it's pretty vague, at least from the North Koreans' perspective, as to exactly what they're signing up for, right?
Yeah, I mean, the North Korean dictator can go back home and say that he's got plenty of wiggle room. He can say that, in effect, what he has pledged to denuclearise is a pledge that has been repeated by previous North Korean leaderships in 1994 and 2005. Now, to be fair, the Chinese have been pushing the Americans for a long time to suspend military exercises with South Korea. And that might give the Chinese and the Americans collectively more leverage on the North Korean dictatorship. But so far, I think it's fair to say the substance of the meeting has fallen short of the sort of rhetoric that Mr. Trump's been using.
Yeah, I actually wonder if maybe the imagery to come out of the summit is the most significant thing.
Yes, and in a sense, the fact that Mr. Trump has met with Kim Jong-un does act as a certain constraint of Kim Jong-un. I mean, it will be difficult now, I think, even for a dictator to resume missile tests in a fit of pique or anger like he has in the past. So in that sense, and it may increase China's leverage over the North Korean regime. At the same time, however, it's quite worrying because the South Korean government was completely taken aback by the suspension of military exercises. There's a feeling in Washington too, and in, I think, other Western capitals, that once again, Mr. Trump seems more comfortable in the company of a dictator or authoritarian leader than he does in the company of liberal democratic leaders. And he was very quick to gloss over the human rights record of the North Korean dictator, saying he was a talented young man. Well, he's very talented. He's talented at being repressive. And I think, in a sense, many people feel that Mr. Trump could have driven a harder bargain than he does. But I think, to be fair, it may be, as your question intimated, a bit of a psychological breakthrough. Maybe it's the beginning of a process which will deliver the outcome I think most people want, which is the denuclearisation of the Korean Peninsula.
How likely is full denuclearisation?
I personally think it's unlikely, because I think, given the dictatorship of the North Korean regime, Kim Jong-un shows no signs of wanting to give up power in the near future. And if you think about it, that's one of the crucial cards he has to play. So he'll want to, I think, make this a very protracted process to maintain what he would see as legitimacy for his regime. And there's a danger for the so-called Libyan scenario, which of course made Kim Jong-un very animated not so long ago, which was raised by John Bolton, whereby if a dictatorship gives up its nuclear deterrent, then it becomes quite vulnerable, not least to domestic pressures in its own country.
How important is China going to be from here on out?
I think China is very important in this. It's interesting that China has given the Trump-Kim Jong-un meeting very little coverage. But I think China is one of the reasons that Kim Jong-un is meeting with Trump. They have put an enormous amount of pressure. It hasn't got a lot of publicity in a lot of the media, but they have been really putting the regime. They are the life support system of the dictatorship in North Korea. They provide fuel and food. And without Chinese support, and China is an ally of North Korea cannot continue its belligerence indefinitely. And I think, in a sense, there's been a convergence of interest between China and Washington. Let's hope this convergence can be sustained and that it can culminate in the denuclearisation of North Korea.
Robert, thank you, as always, for your time and your insight this morning. That is Robert Patman from Otago University.